Welcome into First and North. I'm Tina Nguyen. Boy, do we have a busy, jam-packed show for you today. Let's bring in our panel. Joining me this week on First and North, the voice of the Lions, Dan Miller from Fox Milwaukee, Lily Zhao, and from Fox Minneapolis, Pierre Nugent. Guys, these last 2 weeks have been really quiet in the NFL since the Super Bowl, almost too quiet for my taste. But that's done. That's over because the chaos is back. The NFL Scouting Combine has taken over Indianapolis. Multiple GMs and head coaches spoke today at the Combine. Dan, I'd like to start with you in Detroit because it's the question everyone is asking there. What did you take away from what GM Brad Holmes had to say about the timeline for a decision on Taylor Decker here?
Yeah, I think they're trying to be respectful as they can, and I think they've had conversations with Taylor Decker. Dan Campbell intimated so as well, and even kind of said, we had a conversation after the season and then intimated they'd had some since then, but he was going to keep that private between he and Taylor. And I think they understand that it's a pivotal part of their offseason. Do they need to go out and find a left tackle to start next year, or will they have Taylor Decker back? But I think one key, based on what Dan Campbell said today, is even if Taylor Decker's back, they got to find a guy because Decker's going to have some physical issues that, as Campbell intimated, they're going to need to deal with those. He didn't practice a number of times last year, but would still play in games. So whatever the case, if Decker's back, great. But even if he's not, they got to start planning for the future, and the future may come sooner than they hope if Decker doesn't hold up next year. So there's a lot up in the air. I think the bottom line is they've probably given him a timetable to say, hey, man, we need to know before free agency because we need to know where to allocate our money, and that's a big piece.
Some moving parts there. And Decker, by the way, has been a cornerstone for the Lions offensive line for nearly a decade. Dan, we've been talking about the Drew Petzing hire a lot here. First time we heard from Holmes today about the coaching changes, but I want you to hear what Ben Johnson had to say about Petzing being in Detroit now.
We didn't have to endure the turnover that we had to endure the previous year. I mean, that's hard, man. Like that's a challenge. Now, when you have success, you got to be prepared for those challenges as well. But to get the OC that we were able to get in Drew and even adding, Kafka as well, but not having this wholesale turnover, that was kind of best of both worlds.
Drew doesn't need my advice. Drew does a great job. He's a dear friend of mine, and I know he's going to knock it out of the park there in Detroit. And so very, very happy for him and that opportunity. There's a ton of really good players there. There's some coaches in that building that I care deeply for, and so I think they're in good hands.
A dear friend, as in he was in your wedding. Totally different offseason for the Lions here, not needing to refill the majority of their coaching staff. Dan, what do you make of what Ben Johnson had to say?
Yeah, I mean, last year was tough. You had to go out and you had to replace Ben Johnson, replace Aaron Glenn. That was a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And, Dan Campbell had kept his coaching staff pretty much intact from the time that he had come in and grown used to having those guys there, leaning on them, and the players have been used to them as well. So it was a lot of turnover last year. And while they had a productive offense, they believe they can be better. That's the reason John Morton wasn't calling plays midway through the season and the reason that he's not here now. So it seems like a great fit with Petzing, and it seems like Dan Campbell said today, 20 minutes into my conversation, I knew this was my guy. And to be able to add Kafka as well, as Brad Holmes alluded to, a guy who is respected around the NFL for what he has done in different places, I think they feel good about it. But, guys, these things that we're talking about in March are on paper. We need to see what it looks like on the field. And as we've talked about before, Dan Campbell, in terms of hiring offensive coordinators, Anthony Lynn did not work out. John Morton did not work out. Ben Johnson did. He's 1 for 3. We'll see where he goes with these guys, but I think they feel really good about the setup that they have now.
All about the results at the end of the day. Speaking of Ben Johnson, the Bears have quite the to-do list this offseason. It involves getting under the salary cap, as they are currently more than $9 million over the cap. They need to upgrade the talent on the D-line, and they really need an elite edge rusher. Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles, well aware of all the issues, and I believe one of the storylines that will dominate the NFL Combine. Will the Raiders trade away Max Crosby? GM John Spytek was asked about Crosby, if he expects him to be a Raider next season. He said he does, Personally, I say there's really about a 55% chance. Look, this is a guy, 28 years old. He has played for 5 different head coaches in Las Vegas. I was there. I covered some of those coaches. He's only been a part of one winning season in Las Vegas back in 2021. This guy is a fierce competitor. He wants to win. And one thing's for sure, quarterback Caleb Williams made an appearance on his podcast last week, The Rush. And let's just say, I thought it sent a pretty clear message.
It takes one to know one. Like, I'm a different cat.
Yeah.
I operate different.
Yeah.
People think I'm out of my mind half the time. You know what I mean? I would tat it on my neck.
Yeah.
Like, I like what I like. I do what I do. I'm a little bit different.
Yeah.
You're a different cat. Respect.
Yeah.
At a different level, bro. You're one of those guys for sure, and you're just getting started.
Yep.
I don't even know you understand yet how good you can be.
Yeah.
And that's the scariest part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just keep that mindset, keep doing what you're doing. We're locked in.
All right, it's so obvious that these two really respect one another. Crosby with some pretty high praises there for Caleb Williams. Lily, would you want to see Max Crosby here in the NFC North?
No, unless he's on the Green Bay Packers, right? No, I don't think Jordan Love or the Packers offensive line want to face off against Max Crosby. Listen, the Packers believe they got one of the cream of the crop guys in terms of Micah Parsons, so they don't, probably want another NFC North team to get another premier pass rusher in Max Crosby coming to the NFC North. So I think the Packers would be a fan if he just kind of stayed in Las Vegas, or if he does leave, go somewhere else that's nowhere near Green Bay, where they would play him twice a year. So Packers probably would say no to that.
Lily, let's keep it with you there in Green Bay. So NFL.com released their top 100 free agents this offseason, and Malik Willis was number 1 on the list. Lily, his days are certainly numbered in Green Bay, right?
Yeah, that's the sad part, is that, you want to see your players develop and get a chance to be a starter, but it stinks when you do lose them. And that is going to be the reality for the Green Bay Packers very shortly. Come free agency, Malik Willis earned a big bag. I mean, he has really taken what he has learned in Green Bay and really run off with it. I mean, you saw what he was able to do when Jordan Love was unable to play the end of the year, filling in certain spots. He's really grown as a runner and a thrower, and he's a guy that, was able to just come in and look like a true starter. So I think he's going to be making some really good money in the NFL this year as a starter. The question is, where will he go? I know Miami was a big, talked about spot just because of the familiarity with the Packers staff and Malik Willis. But now the question is, now that he will go, who backs up Jordan Love? So that's going to be a backup quarterback spot that the Packers would really have to evaluate this offseason, whether in the draft or free agency, or maybe with a guy that they have in-house to be the guy that Malik Willis was the last couple of years with the Packers.
Well, the days are certainly numbered for Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, because new GM Ian Cunningham confirmed today that he will be released in March. Pierre, the door seems like it is wide open right now for a reunion. If you had to choose between quarterbacks Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, or Aaron Rodgers, who would you target to have in the quarterback room there in Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy?
Boy, that's a loaded question there, Tina. I'm not really sure which direction I would really go with all of those options. If you would have asked me this question last year, I'm on record. Last year, I was all aboard the Aaron Rodgers train. I thought that would have been a very good fit here in Minnesota. The Vikings decided to pass on Aaron Rodgers. This year around, I think I would also pass on Aaron Rodgers. But, of course, the familiarity with Kirk Cousins is hard to ignore. But if Kirk Cousins comes here, you have to ask, what exactly is he expecting and what exactly is the price? Is Kirk Cousins coming here expecting to be the starter again? Remember, the Vikings let him go in free agency because they believed they had a plan in place of drafting a young quarterback to make that young quarterback their franchise QB for the future. That so far hasn't worked out the way they had hoped, and now the general manager that drafted that quarterback is now gone. So is Kirk Cousins going to come back here expecting to be the starter? I'm not sure if that's his belief at this point of his career, but also you have to remember the Vikings really have to figure out their cap situation right now. They ended the year in cap hell, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get under the cap at some point by either releasing guys or restructuring some contracts to make the addition of Kirk Cousins work. So if Kirk Cousins does come back to Minnesota, I'm not so sure that J.J. McCarthy is going to beat him out for the starting job this year. I know Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson have a great rapport with one another. Justin Jefferson put up big-time numbers while Kirk Cousins was the quarterback here. So while it looks like it could happen, I'm not ready to say it will happen yet, but it's certainly hard to ignore the fact that the Vikings are in need of another quarterback, and the familiarity is all too good there between Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I also know I just threw a lot of options there too. There with all those quarterbacks. NFL Combine will dominate the headlines all week. The Bears have obvious needs, but GM Ryan Poles, he is not going in that route. Take a listen.
Philosophically, I feel the same. It's going to be the best player available. I know that may not be the most popular thing because people see kind of like on my board have yellow tags where we need to fill in. But at the same time, I do believe, especially in early rounds like 1, you really got to stick to the best player available. We saw that last year. I know there's a lot of questions like, you got Cole, why would you take Colston? I think we found out that it helped us along the way. So we'll continue to lean into that philosophy.
All right, Dan, are you a fan of drafting for need or best player available?
You know, I think there are a lot of times where those lines do cross. I think we hear GMs say we're taking the best player available, and frankly, I think a lot of times that's just an easy out for them. They're not going to tell you the Lions are sitting there at 17. We are 100% taking an edge rusher. We're going to find the best edge rusher we can or the best left tackle we can. So I do believe there's oftentimes a little more of a slant to a guy that can come in and help fill a hole. But I think the key is you can't stretch. You can't reach. You can't go, way up your board to find a guy if there's several players that are better. So I think that's the key. It's a fine line that general managers walk. You can't fill a need if the guy's not worthy of being drafted where you're selecting them. But I do think if there's players that are even or there's just a little bit of difference, you're going to go towards the guy that's going to help you fill the hole that you have. So best player available, I think, is a great way for head coaches and general managers just to tell us to shut up. And it's probably the easiest way for them to do it.
Lily, what do you think? Best player available here or draft based on need?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dan. There's a fine line that they do have to walk, right? Because when you look at the board and say, you want to go defensive line, but, there's a guy who's an offensive lineman that could help. It's, do you go for need or do you draft because the guy you wanted was the best player available? It really is a case-by-case basis, and obviously where you are on the board in terms of what teams do need. So that's just the beauty of the NFL Scouting Combine, how that helps you kind of, get your board ready to go. And then once the draft comes around, it's, again, these guys have plans. They have lists and lists of guys that they need, and they will plan for need and best player available. That's what these guys are doing in the offseason. I know for the Packers, though, they're always going to say best player available. That's really kind of been the company line for the Green Bay Packers. So, I mean, that's what we're hearing here in Wisconsin, best player available. But like Dan said, it can go either way.
Pierre, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Dan makes a great point, but also if I have to pick between one or the other, I think it's certainly best player available, because even if you draft a player that you may not have a need for, let's say you draft a really talented wide receiver, but you already have a couple of great wide receivers on your team, you're only one injury away from having to replace that guy. And if you have a rookie come in and outperform one of those two, then you have the possibility of having a guy as trade bait, maybe even get that more expensive player off your books if somebody else has a need at that position. So that's why I think best player available is always the best strategy to go.
All right, well, to round out our first block here on First and North, we'd like to take a moment right now to send our condolences to the family of Vikings wide receiver Rondale Moore, who passed away at the age of 25. The Vikings released a statement stating, quote, "We are deeply saddened by the passing of Rondale Moore. While we are working to understand the facts, we have spoken with his family to offer our condolences and full support from the Vikings." We'll be right back here on First and North. Okay, back here on First and North, I'm Tina Nguyen, joined by Dan Miller in Detroit, Lily Zhao in Milwaukee, and Pierre Nugent in Minneapolis. All right, Dan, how fun is this? The news dropped yesterday. We know there will be 9 international games this coming season. The Lions are slated to play in Germany. Amon-Ra St. Brown's got connections there. He grew up there. Dan, how excited are you to get packing for this game?
Yeah, listen, we've known this was coming for a while. The Lions haven't traveled since 2015 in terms of playing a game overseas, and I feel like every year we've thought, okay, this is the year they're going to be back up. It's going to be their turn, and it just hasn't happened. They went in 14, went in 15, haven't been since. So the guess was always that it was going to be somewhere in Germany because, as you mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown, his mother is German. Amon-Ra has dual citizenship. He speaks fluent German. You will see German reporters that will be at the Lions facility, and he will be talking to them in German. So I think he's going to be a very popular guy there. He does camps there. I think it's a natural fit, and if you're trying to grow the game, have a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown who's a wonderful face to put on it, and I think that's what they're doing, the league sending the Lions there because of Amon-Ra and all the connections that he has, and I think it's going to be a very, very big week.
Well, in terms of playing elsewhere, here in Chicago, the Bears are searching for a new site to build a dome stadium. They now have the option of potentially building and playing in Hammond, Indiana. And for those in Chicago, Arlington Heights is still in the picture, but Pierre, could you imagine going to Indiana to cover a Vikings and Bears game? I mean, how does the Indiana Bears sound to you?
It sounds terrible. What is it's always been the Chicago Bears. I mean, you have these historic franchises, that Chicago Bears, New York Yankees, LA Dodgers. I mean, I know they were in Brooklyn for a long time. I certainly get it, but at the same time, I cannot envision a world in which the Chicago Bears are not in Chicago, let alone in Indiana. I don't know how that would work. I think a lot of the people that enjoy going to the city of Chicago on road trips, covering their team, playing the Bears in Chicago, would certainly be disappointed as well. But I really hope that the local government and local officials out there in Chicago can figure out a way to make sure that this team stays right in the heart of Chicago, because anywhere else would be absolutely baffling to me. I don't even know how we've gotten to this point, to be perfectly honest with you. But anything other than the Chicago Bears would be absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, there is
Is it hard to get dinner reservations on the Miracle Mile in Hammond? Just asking for a friend.
Look, there's a lot to sort out here in Chicago. But, hey, funny enough, though, the great George Halas, I found this out yesterday because I actually went down to Hammond, Indiana. A key figure, obviously, in founding the Bears and the NFL, George Halas actually played for a pro team called the Hammond Pros, which ended up being a team that helped launch the entire NFL. So football history could be coming full circle here, although I just find it still very strange to even think of the Bears playing in Indiana. They belong in Illinois, and I personally think they belong in the great city of Chicago. Lily, many people in Green Bay viewed this offseason as a really big one for the Packers. What did Brian Gutekunst have to say about this at the Combine?
Yeah, well, before I get to that, though, guys, as a Hoosier resident, the Hoosier state is my home. It's sacrilegious if the Chicago Bears come to Indiana, so I'm putting that out there. But to your question,
wow.
Tina, I would just say, sorry, guys. But, for Brian Gutekunst at the NFL Combine, he was talking about, again, just he believes the Packers are going to be a Super Bowl contender. They're going to have to really prove it this offseason in terms of what they do with free agency, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and how they value those 5th, 6th, 7th-year players. And so that's going to be a big question for Brian Gutekunst. But he did acknowledge, listen, they don't have a first-round pick. So, he was asked, would you go into the first-round pick or into the first round to get a guy if this, potentially great player fell into your laps? And he said, if that's the case, maybe yes, but in all likelihood, no. So again, they're kind of all evaluating what they can do next season to get over that hump, but they believe that the core group that they have, a lot of those players got injured last year, are players that can take them to a Super Bowl in terms of Micah Parsons, Tucker Kraft, Devontae Wyatt, etc. So again, they're just doing their best this week to scout out what they have at the Combine and make that list. But, Brian Gutekunst probably very, positive in terms of the direction this organization is going. But again, they want the right pieces because that Super Bowl has been a decade plus since they've seen that thing, so they want to make a run this year for sure.
All right, as for the Bears at the Combine, Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson both said they are receiving calls about backup quarterback Tyson Bagent, who signed a 2-year extension back in August. Bagent is a player who they have heavily invested time and development in. Ben Johnson has always spoken so highly of him, believes they are wired the same way. One of the things that isn't being talked about enough, though, is Caleb Williams and his durability. But as we all know, every time a player steps onto that football field, they're just one play away from from things drastically changing. I think Ben Johnson has a lot of trust in Tyson Bagent to step up and win them a game if need be. Polls also said today it would be a, quote, really tough decision to trade Tyson Bagent. Got to look at things from the lens of a short-term and long-term perspective, too. Two more things we learned from the Bears. They are preparing to not have Ozzie Trapillo for most of the season. Joe Tooney will not be moving into that left tackle position. Meanwhile, Ryan Poles addressed the compensatory picks the Bears are not receiving from Ian Cunningham taking the Falcons job. Take a listen.
You know, Ian's the general manager. He's running the team, putting the roster together, drafting, free agency, everything the traditional GM does. The structure is just a little bit different. So we're looking forward just to getting a response on why the change in the rule for us.
I haven't had much time to really dive into like the wording of it. It was always my interpretation that if the general manager gets hired, that team would receive 2 third-round picks. I'm the general manager. I was hired. I would think that they would get 2 third-round picks.
I mean, it just seems like it's pretty clear that the Bears do need to receive some draft picks there for that. Lily, in Green Bay, Rich Bisaccia stepped down as assistant head coach and special teams coordinator. Lily, I covered him when he was in Las Vegas as the interim head coach after John Gruden resigned. He took the Raiders to the playoffs, wild card appearance in 2021. They lost to the Bengals. He is so well respected around the NFL. How big of a loss is this?
I think it's a good loss for the Packers. Not good, but I think it's a big loss. But that being said, he's kind of been on the hot seat in Green Bay the last couple of seasons just for how his special teams units have underperformed. And you can look at the statistics from last year, and statistically they were a little bit better. But you can talk about his kicking unit costing the Packers 3 to 4 games. That one in Chicago in the postseason, the biggest one. And so it's been a debacle the last decade in Green Bay, just not finding the special teams coordinator that can get a team over a hump and win a Super Bowl. The Packers look at the Seahawks and what they're able to do with their special teams unit, and the Packers are nowhere close to that. So while it is a big loss in terms of having a guy who's been in the organization for a couple of years, very well respected, this is going to be a big, position for Matt LaFleur to fill. I was hearing that it was kind of a shock that, he did step down, but now it's, the Packers are kind of saying, they have faith in him this season, so the surprise factor in it is interesting.
All right, we need to take our final break here on First and North. Up next, Team USA bringing home the gold, ending a 46-year drought. It still has everyone here buzzing. The guys finally back on American soil yesterday. Why this impact goes far beyond the ice next. All right, let's end things on a high note here, or a golden note, if I may say, and relive what happened this weekend. The U.S. men's hockey team struck gold. Shout out Matt Boldy for the opening goal. Jack Hughes got his teeth knocked out at the Olympics. That's expected. You're a hockey player, but he delivered on Olympic ice in overtime. But Connor Hellebuck stopped 41 of 42 shots standing on his head. Guys, I set an alarm at 6:30 a.m. to catch this game, with the puck dropping at 7:10. Where did you guys watch this game, and how early did you wake up? Lily, I'll start with you.
I'll be honest, I was in bed watching on my phone. I can't lie. It was a little bit too lazy to get out of bed to watch the game, but if it's accessible on your phone, why not? So I was nice and warm and cozy, and it was a phenomenal game to watch. So I was really stoked to see both the men and women win gold in Milan.
Dan, just an emotional win. U.S. back on the mountaintop there. What'd you make of the U.S. defeating their rival, Canada?
Well, we loved it, and it was great, and it was must-see TV, and I watched it at the house, and we were proud in Michigan. If you look at all 4 players that were on the ice for the game-winning goal, all of them have roots in Michigan, so a lot of pride in that victory.
Pierre, how early did you wake up, and did you like the 3-on-3 format in overtime?
Like Lily, I had my alarm set for 7 a.m. and I did watch it in my bed on my laptop for the first 3 periods. However, I did move to the couch when overtime was rolling around because I did not want to wake up my wife at that point, and let alone I did, obviously, after Jack Hughes scored. So as far as 3-on-3 goes, I don't think it's the ideal way to do it. I didn't hate it by any means. I kind of feel like it needs to be settled at minimum 4-on-4, but still a great result for the United States.
All right, that does it for us here on First and North. For Dan, Lily, and Pierre, I'm Tina Nguyen. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next week.